Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 5th edition of the Town Board Workshop. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, indivisible.
Well, that sounds terrible.
That would call the roll, please.
Councilperson Tice,
Here.
Councilperson Chase,
Here.
Supervisor Williver,
Here.
Councilperson Riley.
Here.
We're going to start tonight with the manufactured home presentation. And then we'll discuss the zoning R20 and R30.
Okay, I sent your request to share. Okay. Okay, is that it? All set? I will begin. As part of the code committee, personally was hoping to avoid getting into the mobile home laws in the town code. But something has come up, which I'll explain, and the code committee did look into it. And the result is this presentation, which will end up suggesting that we try to get these changes into the consideration of R20 and R30 that you're undertaking already. So here's an example of a motor home. This is just an example. Rush has no mobile homes that I know of. But the one thing you'll always look for with a mobile home is the skirting around the base, which essentially is hiding the chassis and potentially wheels if there are any in there. Otherwise, the bottom would be open. And this I would say is, to be fair, is probably the low end of what you would see in a mobile home, but not unusual. So the consideration of this topic by the code committee was prompted by two recent informational requests to the building inspector for manufactured homes installation on private lots in Western Rush. Actually, I think one was on Perry Hill Road, not in the probably not in the R mobile home district, and one was on East River Road, right, John?
Yes.
Are they, can I just ask, are they standalone or parks?
This would have been standalone. We'll get into that in some detail. So the current town code, as it turns out, has obsolete terminology and therefore is open to misunderstanding and perhaps legal challenge. But what actually the code committee proposes to do is correct the town code wording deficiencies that are in the current code and some minor errors, which always crop up when you start looking in detail at what the code says. But we don't propose making any changes to the current intent of the town code. Since we are suggesting the town board agree to correctly continue the existing mobile home zoning policies, we thought it was appropriate that you understand what those town code policies are. And this presentation will provide that understanding of what the law actually says now, which gets the Gene's point of individual lot versus parks. So the primary cause of the code issues are that manufactured homes and mobile homes are both regulated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, as everybody knows it. The only difference between the two names is that they were built according to HUD. Such a factory-built home prior to June 15th, 1976 is a mobile home when our code was written, and one built after that time is a manufactured home. And unlike most other towns, the Rushtown Code has not been updated to accommodate that 1976 name change to manufactured home. So there are two parts of the code that are pertinent here. One is chapter 120 zoning and two sections there. One is 125 definitions and word usage, and the other is 120-10.1 RMH residential districts, the MH standing for mobile home. And then the other chapter is chapter 77 mobile home parks, which goes into some detail, which I'll get into just a little bit of. So the devil is in the details, and the details are in the definitions. I'll get into what some of those pertinent definitions are and why they kind of define what's going on here. But chapter 77 mobile home parks explicitly states that the definitions in chapter 120 zoning are applicable to that chapter. So here's the one most important definition, and that is the current definition of a mobile home. It's a house trailer or any other movable dwelling originally designed, built, or constructed to be towed or conveyed on its own chassis, whether the same is situated or located upon wheels, jacks, foundations, temporary or permanent, slabs, or otherwise, and or whether or not added to or made a part of another building or structure. So the big deal here really is its own chassis. Doesn't matter if it's sitting on a foundation or on a pad. Now, there are a few disadvantages of mobile homes that's probably worth mentioning as you're considering whether the current code is important or correct. Appearance tends to be lacking, at least in some cases. They are more susceptible to extreme weather, whether it be high winds or floods. They're more expensive to repair due to unconventional construction and materials compared to stick-built homes. They are considered personal property and not real estate from a legal sense. So insurance tends to be more costly. Common home mortgages are not available. May be able to get something from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that type of thing. But they tend to lose value rather than appreciate with inflation like other housing does. In order to understand everything we're talking about here, it's important to look at floor size, mobile home size, and other building floor size. But in section 120.16, size of buildings, RMH minimum is 600 square feet of floor space. So that indeed could be a single wide, whether it's 15 by 40 or 12 by 50 or any other choice. Interestingly enough, double wides and triple wides could easily meet R20 and R30 minimum building sizes of 1,000 and 1,200 square feet respectively, if mobile homes were permitted in those districts. Sizes, of course, could be limited just by the ability and the highway laws around getting them to the site. So just the size could be restricted by highway restrictions. Now here's a pretty significant statement, and you may question how it can be true, but that is that mobile homes on individually owned lots are not permitted in any district in the town of Rush. In any district, and these are more definitions, a dwelling is a building with dwelling units occupied exclusively for residential uses. And even more important, a building is any structure having a roof supported by columns or by walls and intended for the shelter, housing, or enclosure of persons, animals, chattels, but not including a mobile home. So that's right in the definition. And that is fundamentally why a dwelling cannot be considered, a mobile home cannot be considered a dwelling. And a dwelling, of course, is what single family or double family or whatever dwellings must be. But you asked a question, what about mobile homes in an R mobile home district? We have just one district.
Do we still?
Excuse me?
Do we still?
Yes. Yes. What the code committee proposed getting rid of that so we could use the 120-10 number for the mixed use hamlet. Remember that? We said, let's just get rid of RMH. There's nobody using it. And the legal word that came down is you really don't want to do that in the state of New York, because the state really expects towns to have some provision for low-cost housing, and we really ought to keep that. So if you look at it there, it's the gray area.
But can I just talk about that for a second?
Okay.
And I can stand to be corrected if I'm wrong.
Okay.
and that may be true. That rationale, whether it's a legal or a requirement is another question. And my understanding is you can't outlaw them, but you don't have to have a zone for them.
Okay.
Am I right on that? Do you, anybody
I
recall?
don't know.
Jenny, I actually voted on this way back with Bill Udicious and Don Nab. It was brought to our attention, just like it was just stated, that the towns were mandated to have a spot for mobile homes. And I'm probably not using the right terminology right now, but mobile home, manufactured home, but manufactured homes back then, but I think we all, at the time, were using the mobile home terminology. And we felt that this would be, originally there was a plan for over there. And so we had to come up with ideas, and that's why we put it over there. Because somebody had some intent that they may want to do that. And then obviously it never developed. But at the time we were advised by the legal people that we had that the state was requiring it, and we had to come up with a spot for it. So that was why we ended up with it. And that's why it ended up over there. We thought that was the best place. If we're going to have it, put it over there. So a little background from 1990s.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought I had heard that you had to set aside some place to have it, but
Okay, I really don't know. I'm pretty convinced it's a bad idea not to have some place, but I don't know what the legal requirement really is. At least from I think two different attorneys that we're in transition about that time, and I think they both said we really want to keep it. But I don't know the legal basis behind it. Where it is carved out of an R20, which is the tan area there.
mhm.
That's
So
why
I
we
thought it was the
proposed
whole
we originally proposed just making it into R20.
John, maybe you know where that is, aren't they actively building on those sites? Is there something going, is there anything
There's
being
one.
built?
Yeah, there's single family homes.
If you look at Perry Hill Road there, that string of numbers
Yeah,
going across there, those are those lots that were
Okay.
just created. And one of those lots has the one home on it now
yeah,
with the fence around it. One of the requests I got was for one of those other lots in that row.
Okay.
But I think that's the R20.
Yes.
right, but what I'm asking is, there's no single family dwellings being proposed in this.
No, that's
Okay.
all woodland road.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of
Oh,
way
in the
up. I think
RMH.
It might be beyond where the road ends right now, if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken.
Yeah, I know, I'm familiar with the area, I just wasn't sure if there was anything.
But that's
proposed for over there.
a great segue into this slide, and that is 120-10.1, the RMH district permits two primary use categories. One is all uses permitted in an R20 district, subject to all the conditions and requirements applying to uses permitted in such a district. So that means that mobile homes are not permitted under that R20 portion, okay? But mobile home parks, subject to all of the provisions of Chapter 77, are permitted. So we'll talk about what is a mobile home park on the next slide. So this says you can't have an individual mobile home on a lot in an R20 district. And therefore you can't either in an RMH, but you could have a mobile home park. So what does a mobile home park mean? And it's really, if you read Chapter 77, it is a specified system of features. That is my term, not the code's term, but requires site plan approval. And that those features include, these are all required, a minimum of 5 acres with 2 or more minimum 10,000 square foot lots under the same ownership. So that gets to why you can't have an individual lot. It requires roads, parking spaces, sidewalks, landscaping, mobile home stands, utility hookups, disposal of stormwater and sewage. It requires a recreation area of 5,000 square feet or more, and the or more means that as you get more lots, you reach a point where you have to increase the recreation area. It requires services provided by the owner of those 2 lots, like road maintenance, snow removal, refuse and waste removal, and overall supervision. Now, if you do the mathematics, 5 acres and 10,000 square foot lots, theoretically, you could have about 21 lots on those 5 acres. But that would be extremely restricted by the fact that there's no public water currently on Perry Hill Road. And there's no public sewer. So when you start putting, as we discussed last time, septic systems and wells on the same lot, you get up in the range of an acre or more before, so you can reasonably do that for each lot. So I said that the code committee proposes to keep the current code intent. And this is more specifically what we're proposing. We would add a definition for manufactured home using the current mobile home definition. So we would just kind of take that wording and move it to the term manufactured home, being the primary modern terminology used now. We would keep a mobile home definition, but it would essentially just say see manufactured home. We would actually add another definition for manufactured / mobile home. And this is a reason why, and it would have, those 3 terms would have the same meaning. We would change all mobile home references in chapter 120 zoning and chapter 77 mobile home parks to the term manufactured / mobile home. Now, we didn't invent that. Webster actually did that very change, and all of their code uses that term manufactured / mobile home, just to eliminate any possibility of misunderstanding. There are a few typos and errors that we would need to fix. If you look at, there's sections in chapter 7 referring to sale of lots and violation of the code. And those refer to the fact that the code enforcement officer could refer the matter to the planning board to revoke the so-called special permit. However, if you look at chapter 120 and chapter 77, there is no such thing as a special permit for mobile home park. It's a site plan for a mobile home park. So we want to change that revocation from special permit to site plan as necessary. And there are a few other typos. We need to change references of enforcement officer to building inspector and things like that in a few cases. Now, eventually we'd want to change the name on the town map to RMH, keep that same name, but change the meaning to manufacturing / mobile home. But I don't see that as a real high priority, and I certainly wouldn't do it as a change by itself. There is one more thing I want to point out as a potential factor that some people could get upset about. They don't understand what's going on. There is a chapter 65 flood damage prevention that you folks approved as local law 3 of 2024. It was an update required by the DEC, essentially using what I call below boilerplate language. And it does, if you do a search on the term manufactured home in our town code, manufactured home does turn up in this chapter 65, flood damage prevention. It also includes a definition for manufactured home. It includes a definition of structure and building that explicitly includes manufactured homes. Remember, I said our definition, chapter 120, explicitly excludes mobile homes. This is the exact opposite. But as I said, chapter 65 is standard boilerplate wording that's essentially used by all towns, so that lots with manufactured homes follow the same flood damage policies as lots with standard homes. But because each chapter states where their definitions apply, that definition contradiction between chapters 120 and 77 really doesn't matter, and you shouldn't be concerned about it. So each chapter says this definition refers to this. It doesn't pretend to apply to anything else. Just beware if you're looking at the details at that level, you would find this. There is a related topic, modular homes. And John pointed this out to the code committee. So what's the difference between a modular home versus a manufactured / mobile home? Modular homes and mobile homes are both built in factories and then installed on site. However, modular homes do not have a chassis and are not designed for ongoing mobility. Modular homes must follow local building codes in the state and county in which they're installed. And modular homes have or tend to have these characteristics. They are often delivered in 2 or more pieces, since they must adhere to the zoning district minimum floor area requirements in the districts where they're intended to be used. They're built on crawl spaces or basements to meet the building codes. They look like traditional stick-built homes in both size and features. So, to be thorough, we have a modular home proposal as well. And that is, we would add to section 120-5, a definition to clarify that modular homes are allowed as dwellings anywhere that dwellings are allowed. So this could stand as a lower cost option for people. That we do now allow, because there's nothing in the code to prevent it, and we would make that more clear with this proposal. So this definition of a modular home comes mostly from Geneseo, and it is a factory manufactured dwelling unit conforming to applicable provisions of this code and bearing an insignia of approval issued by a New York State licensed architect or engineer, confirming that it meets all state uniform building, fire, and energy codes, and which is constructed by a method or system of construction whereby the structure or its components are wholly or in substantial part manufactured in a manufacturing facility, intended or designed for permanent installation or assembly and permanent installation. We would slightly modify the building definition to say any structure having a roof supported by columns or by walls and intended for the shelter, housing, or enclosure of persons, animals, or chattels, including a modular home, but not including a manufacturing/mobile home. So again, this is not a change from current policy, it's just a clarification. So that comes down to the basis behind our proposal. Can we agree to include these mobile manufactured home and modular home changes to Chapter 120 zoning and Chapter 77 mobile home parks on the same timeline with the Chapter 120 residential changes that we're now moving through the approval process of? And you're going to be discussing more tonight.
That seems reasonable.
So we're basically adding definitions, but not any changes to permitted uses.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And just a few wording changes.
Yep.
They said that for errors in the current code that don't make any sense. Where the code doesn't state what the current intentions are, we're fixing that, which were errors, right? But in terms of the overall intent of where a mobile home can be used, not changing at all.
Okay.
But to be perfectly blunt and open, there are towns that have the policy of allowing mobile homes anywhere that another home can be built. Phelps would be an example. Towns that do that, though, tend to have, and that would still have size limitations, right? It doesn't change. But towns that do that tend to say that the skirt has to be block or stone or brick, that siding that has to have a peaked shingled roof. It has to have some other things that make it look a lot like a regular house. So we're not proposing that. Most towns, I'd say 89% of towns, do not do that. It would be unusual, but some do.
I think it's good. I think that, like you said, it cleans up the language in it and defines it more adequately. And no, I think they did a good job on this, the Code Committee.
Thank you. I think we got through this in just a couple of weeks, which the way our committee's designed, we're able to do. Okay, so wherever we come out tonight, we already know there are some changes that the proposal that we gave you on R20 and R30 need to be made.
Yep.
We have special permit issues. We have parking issues that we need to be better defined.
Yep.
We would add this to that whole package and whatever else you folks come up with tonight that you would like to have change.
Okay. That was good.
Okay.
Bring it over here so I can write on the table and write on the front.
Okay, so we'll move into the review of zoning 120 and R20 and R30.
Is it better if I just stay here? Would you like me to go back to the audience?
That's, you're better than,
Okay, and I got the microphone.
You want to start from the beginning? Is there anything that sticks out that you want to start making changes?
Well, I guess, well, however you want to start, I made notes on a lot of pages.
Okay,
I did spend time. On the first page, under, there's I guess, pretty much definitions on, 120-5B. Accessory building, accessory structure. I had a question. Is a barn considered an accessory building or structure?
It would be if it's not agricultural.
Okay, if it's not agricultural, okay. So if it is, does that still true that it cannot be larger in area than the house?
I think that's the case, yeah. I'm not sure what the code says. I know our proposal states that it has to fit the requirements of size relative to the house and the lot. No, but it could be bigger. It could be bigger than the house. If the lot's big enough,
Yeah,
the barn could be bigger than the house for sure.
okay,
Because our proposal that we limit the building size is the larger of a fraction of the house size or a fraction of the lot size. So as the lots get big, typically the barn can easily be bigger than a house.
okay. Okay. When we talk about airstrips, as I was reading here and elsewhere in this sections, we talk about what an airstrip is, and then we further talk about it. But as I was reading all of it, I was, is there anywhere that we have any limitations about the use of an airstrip to, say, a single engine or a small propeller-driven plane? I mean, can you have jets, major jets, other?
I think,
It's my understanding that, if you're going to operate an airstrip, you have to conform with both New York State and federal requirements, like the FAA type thing. And that's where your limitations, like you couldn't have a grass strip and try to land a jet, a private jet on it. They have the rules and requirements.
So I guess my question is, someone with a large enough area of land could have pretty long runway if, is that permitted in the town?
it exists.
I understand we have
Let's,
2 airstrips, right? I have not
Two or-
personally,
There's at least 2, there could be 3, I'm not sure.
2 or 3 is my
I
understanding.
got one of the biggest airstrips right over my house, just about Dick Ski over there on Schofield Road.
yeah, I know, I
Big,
was aware there was
lighted,
one. Do you know
Um,
how big it is? What kind of plane lands there?
He runs a twin engine, it's not a jet, but it's about as close as you can get. And, that's probably about as big as you ever see land. I mean, I suppose in an emergency, almost, you could probably put a bigger plane down in an emergency, but not a normal, it won't be a normal process. I mean, he hit a by property all up and down at the ends of his strip, take the trees down and clear a lot of area for this last plane that he's got.
Oh,
So,
yeah, you've been lit.
So, but does the town, as I read this, do we not have any restrictions on what you're allowed to land in a residential zone?
Not that I'm aware.
Should we?
A few years ago, somebody started flying a plane in, and the attorney at the time said FAA should have something to say about it, but I never heard that there was any restriction on him. And he continued to fly in. And the guy that owned the airstrip bought it because he believed that it was allowed in Rush, but if it's not specifically allowed, it's not allowed.
Okay, so
But he
I guess
continued to land for quite a while.
I would like to understand that before we pass anything, and whether we need to add something or at least have the discussion about what you're allowed to land in a residential zone. That's different from commercial and all, you know, all the rest. I'm talking because we're dealing with residential zones.
Yep.
And I just would like to understand. I'd like to have some clarification on that.
I think on the one, I know the one that's by me has been there forever. I mean, it's
Yeah.
early sixties. And, I don't think there's ever been a permit that was pulled on it, and it's been there for so long that now they feel it's an entitlement, you know, I don't think I don't think the town has a lot of leverage on it myself, but
Well, maybe not on, I have no idea getting into legal issues, you know, and I'm not suggesting that we tell this person that he can't do what he's been doing. I'm just saying, do we have something in the code about what you can do in a residential zone?
If I could speak just a little bit of that. I agree, it's not, limitations are not well spelled out on here. But these are essentially word for word copies of multiple towns who use the same wording. So somebody came up with it and lots of people copied them, and this is an additional copy. I noticed that one of the requirements that has to be specified in the application is type of aircraft expected to be based at the airport, parentheses, single engine, multi-engine, turboprop jet, etc. Okay. And number 8 does say it requires a copy of the airspace clearance granted by the Federal Aviation Administration for this airport. So I would hope they would have some type of requirements based on the size of the airport, the width of it, and all those sorts of things. But it's a fair question. I couldn't give you any specifics other than that we copied other towns.
I mean, a jet engine can be pretty noisy.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would really like to get this resolved in here, you know.
Maybe that requires checking with the FAA is what they would allow.
In a
Right.
residential,
Yeah.
do they talk about
So
that?
apparently
I
if there
don't
is an
know.
airspace clearance, it has to be granted by the FAA. For each airport.
I wonder if they have anything as far as, I think what Gene's getting at is how close are you to other houses as
Yep.
far as what size plane you can have? How big your lot is.
Yeah, I don't know what
Things of that
FAA
nature.
rules
Right.
say at all.
And there is, both New York State and the federal that you have to comply with, so, you know, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think there is something about the state too.
I don't know about Dick Skis, but in 2019, when the new airport popped up, I don't think he had any kind of clearance with anybody.
So,
He
okay,
just
there's
had a flat.
there's another number 9, that says a copy of the new, one of the things that has to be in the application is a copy of the New York State Commissioner of Transportation's determination concerning this airport in accordance with the provisions of section 249 of the New York State General Business Law. I have no idea what that is either, but that's something we can look at.
Is that like, it was just like almost like a glider type plane? Is that the one that was in 2009?
It's a regular airplane,
Was
like
it?
a small Cessna.
Oh, okay.
And apparently you have friends that flew in too.
Oh,
It was kind of like a short-term rental / aviation, you know, instead of driving in and parking, you
Yeah.
fly in.
Yeah.
And that brought up other potential concerns like, are you selling avgas and are you maintaining planes and,
Huh.
you know,
Yeah, I think you're crossing the line from personal use there, in my opinion. I'm gonna be a real pain in the arse tonight, I'm telling you right now. You would
Fired up.
expect no less, sir.
Fired up. I know at the time. John Mancuso said, if it's not specifically allowed, it's not
It's not
allowed.
permitted. If it's not permitted outright, or
Yeah.
it's not permitted with a special, then
Yeah.
it's not allowed.
That it's not allowed. But it didn't stop. Well, it has now, but it
Yeah,
continued
so-
for a while.
120-7, which is R20, and the same thing as an R20 to R30. All uses not specifically permitted by virtue of subsection A or B, which is permitted and is permitted with a special permit, shall be prohibited.
So I guess we have that.
We do. The problem we're gonna run into that we heard before is that, as Luther mentioned, they've been in existence for so long that pre-existing non-conforming, and it's almost like the town has given tacit approval because we haven't stopped it.
So on that issue and other issues, similar things, we have to be better because you set precedents, which is dangerous. How do you tell the next one? You can't put your plane in here because we don't allow it. It doesn't say you can have it. And then, well, what about him?
I have no
Um,
problem telling the new applicant that they can't do it because the code won't allow them.
Yeah.
You know, going after somebody that's had it for
I
30 years.
no, I agree. I agree. But
I mean, I'm not opposed to having a small private airstrips in town either, but I would be interested to see what criteria they have to meet on a federal and state level.
Yeah, I'd like to
Right.
see it go through the FAA.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
for some sort of approval.
Yeah.
But we can certainly try to look up what the FAA requires and what the New York State requires, because they're both referred to in this standard write-up.
Dan, do you think there's any way we could get John to sit where, Derek would sit so we could hear him on the mic? It's very hard to hear him when he's talking.
oh, is that on?
Looks like it. I thought I saw the green light in the back there.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Much better.
Shall we move? Keep going?
Sure.
Mhm.
Where we talk about bed and breakfast, again, this is under the definition, the area. Where we talk about which provides short-term and no more than in 31 days, and I guess that comes out from Canadice's code,
Yes.
but should we consider something less?
Actually, the prior, this change definition, I believe, has already been revised one time. And yeah, I think it at one time did say 1 week, or maybe it still does, I'm not sure. Some changes came in with mixed use hamlet. But if you prefer 1 week, we could do that, but you know, it's not unusual for somebody to take a 2-week vacation, for example.
Yeah, so I was suggesting 15
15 days.
days
That's-
consecutive.
That's an option. There's nothing cast in stone about 31. I think the intent was to separate short-term from ongoing month after month. That's really what it was. A month after month is kind of a long-term lease as opposed to a building or room rental.
I think, from being a hotel liver, living in them constantly, when we were staying in them constantly, we still had to check out every 30 days and check back. We could literally walk out the door and walk back in again, but we had to check out. And there was something about the New York State law that it becomes a residence if you don't do that.
Mm,
And maybe that's what they're thinking here on this here, possible.
yeah, I would just, food for thought here on making it less than 31 or 30. Um,
Yeah, I guess I go either way, I guess.
yeah,
I don't feel strongly either.
We don't currently have any bed and breakfasts in town.
And I think 1 week is too short, but.
Yeah, I would
15 or
be fine.
31.
Yeah, I would be, yeah, I wouldn't want to go any less than, like Scott said, 15 probably.
well, that's
but
what I'm suggesting, 15.
Yeah. I'd be fine with that.
So I'm okay with everything until we get down to garage sale. But if anybody else has comments, we could stop above that. I'm just going straight down.
What do you have?
What's the, commercial vehicle?
Okay, let me go up.
Yeah. What's, any vehicle with commercial signs, et cetera, et cetera? Does that mean there can't be any in the residential area or what? I guess I'm looking for clarification on the statement.
So that's really just a definition that doesn't get into what the code allows. I mean, definitions can, as was just talked about with the 31 versus 15 days,
Okay,
definitions can have some code in them, but this one doesn't. This is just defining what is considered a commercial vehicle, so that when the term commercial vehicle is used later in the code, you can tell what it is based on this definition.
okay, got it. Thank you.
And I guess we didn't have something in there for going back down to garage sales. We didn't have anything within.
I don't think we had anything in there to define the garage sale.
Well, there is a section that talks about rules for garage sales.
Okay,
So again, this is just an attempt to say what a garage sale is.
is, okay,
And then there is a section which I could find, but it's a certain section number in the back that
okay,
says what the rules are.
okay, and that section, and I think I remember reading it somewhere else too.
Yeah,
Would that define, about how much time you can have a garage
that
sale?
section does follow the state law. The state law says if you're selling stuff for more than 3 days, it's not a garage sale, it's a business. So you have to have a tax certificate.
Right, okay,
So there is a 3-day requirement, but that excludes a number of categories.
so we don't want to talk about that here,
Correct.
okay.
Under gravel mining, you got a definition, pretty much sticks to the fact that you're mining gravel, but to topsoil, we won't necessarily want somebody to come in and strip topsoil and treat it and sell that. I wouldn't think without some type of, or have a definition in there for topsoil sales too.
Yeah, there again, this is another one where it tends to get into what the code is, but there is a section on gravel mining. And there is a section on prohibited activities, and one of those states you cannot do topsoil stripping. That you cannot strip topsoil off a property and sell it essentially outside the town, or maybe even within the town, outside the property. So topsoil stripping is covered somewhere. I could find.
Okay.
It. Yeah.
All right.
It definitely is in there.
Anything else? I would, for discussion purposes, under home occupation, I would just like to reinforce what it is. I'm not changing any wording or suggesting any change here, Scott. I'm just want to reinforce it in everybody's head that it's a non-residential use. Keep that in mind. And then we differentiate minor and major. And I'm okay with home occupation minor because I think that's all we should have or allow. We define what a major home occupation is. But I'll tell you right now, and I've mentioned it to you, Dan, I am opposed to any major home occupations. Because it's not a minor home occupation. And we're saying a home occupation, again, going back to the definition, is a non-residential use. And we are talking about residential zones. That's our primary objective here. And one of my primary objectives is to make sure that we are preserving our residential districts for that. So that people, when they're home, can enjoy their homes. And we're saying that it's a non-residential use that is customarily incidental and subordinate to the principal use and located on the same lot. So anything beyond that goes beyond what should be permitted in a residential zone.
Aren't the major home occupations to kind of legitimize, there's businesses located in residential areas.
Well, let's
throughout
talk
the town.
about what they are. What kind of businesses?
Burn Balance for one of them,
Okay,
store racing next to him.
and I know that
Right,
that was a
right, was-
special permit, that racing thing, that was a special
special permit.
condition. Just so that that would not be
And
repeated.
that's also, Scott could have more details, but that's also potentially a new zoning classification.
We talked about that and I'm against that too. I'll tell you, we'll get there. Again, all right, I'm gonna get off on a tangent if I do that, but I have it written down so we can just follow. We do have people doing things out of their homes. And, you know, lots of things happen because for whatever reason, people just do it. And no one knows about it, or it gets found out about it, or it's been there for ages. And I'm not saying that we got these people now have to move their businesses. I'm not suggesting that we police existing businesses and saying you got to get out of town. Or move to a different zone. Your business needs to be in a different zone. But as we're looking at things, I think we can't say that, well, because that one's there. And that's the problem with precedents. You know, and because some prior building inspector said, don't worry about it. Or because somebody was a friend of somebody, and don't be shocked. These things happen. And I'm saying we shouldn't make it permissible in the town. We should not do anything that's going to detract from a residential zone where people have a right to expect peace and quiet in their homes. And anything where you're going to allow employees and extra parking and this and that and the other thing. And I think is a big mistake and detracts from the town, from the residences. We have special treatment here in the mixed use hamlet. That's different because it's a mixed bag here. But anything, you know, that's not in those zones that are in residential zones should remain residential, other than you know, you have a small business, no employees. And you don't have, you know, lots of cars coming and going and parking in there, a retail establishment. You know, there could be someone hanging out their shingles, someone an independent accountant or attorney or whatever. I don't do this out of my home, by the way. I work at
Yeah,
occasionally, but not with clients. Go ahead.
I think in general, I can agree with you. Like if you went up on the Harvest Lane, a middle road, that's a very residential area. I'm using that as an example.
Yeah.
But then you go out by myself or by Dan Chase out there on the south end of town, my closest neighbor is 1,200 feet away. And I think that's why it's good to have the ability to, you can come into the town and, hey, maybe that I want to put a haircut business. I get one card an hour or something, you know. The ability to do that. I think you're right. In denser areas where there's a lot of residential people, I can understand that 100%. But I think on the other hand, Rush is a very rural town, and there's a lot of open areas here that we're all classed. Like I'm classified as residential. I know Dan is residential. We fall into that category, and you know, I just think we should have the ability for some, if they fall into, depending on what they want to do. I'm not saying they got to open a Walmart. I'm not saying nothing like that. I'm saying, you know, a small business and they want to try and do something, and you know, they come to the planning and zoning board and see what they can do. You know,
So we are saying that I'm saying minor home occupations are okay. Where you have someone who is getting a haircut, you have, you know, some individual, you know, with a barber's license, giving haircuts in their home, no problem. That to me is minor. It's not a big thing. You know, but you know, and there could be other types of things. I'm not saying that that's all inclusive, but that's thrown out as the kind of an example. But you know, but we are talking about residential districts here, residential districts.
I don't see how Vern Valence detracts from the residential character of that neighborhood at all. He supplies a service to residents of the town, among other people, but
And all he
he's across
does,
the street from the gun club.
yeah, but people don't come to him.
No, but he has trucks and equipment.
He's got a truck, and I
He
get
has
that,
employees,
but
but
if I were
this is
to
trying
get
to,
something today, I would say, no, you can't. There's a lot of things that have been turned down in recent times because it's beyond the minor home occupation. People told you gotta be in another zone for your business.
If I could just make some comments.
Yep.
The primary comment I would say is just read the sections that describe a minor home occupation and a major home occupation.
Yep,
I think there
A lot
was
of-
some, didn't you,
Oh,
wasn't there
there's a
some
lot of-
size
There's
limitations?
a lot of size limitations.
Yeah,
Some of the things that you have been saying that are okay would fall in a major home occupation, not a minor. I think this idea of a haircut business where people are coming to the house an hour, that would be a major, not a minor. That would be too much for a minor. Vern Valence would not fit a major. That's why we proposed a whole another district there if we want to preserve Vern Valence. He has more than 2 non-resident employees, and the big trucks, even if they're parked indoors, that would not fit under a major. So a lot of towns that have majors and minors, they're also towns that have large lot zoning districts, like a 3-acre district. Sort of like our R5 that we don't have, but it's in the code. So a lot of towns who have majors restrict them to those large districts. Mendon would be an example. Mendon allows majors, but only on their essentially 3-acre lot size. That is why the closest we could come to that would say, if you want to apply for a major home occupation, you have to have a 3-acre lot. And by the way, it has to be a lot that doesn't have wetlands that included in the 3 acres. It doesn't have 15% slopes. It doesn't have easements that somebody else has a right to use. So it's got to be an open 3 acres. And the planning board would consider, what does that lot look like? Are there wetlands and forests and hills, and do they block the business, or do they make the business locate near where neighbor has to see it? All those considerations would go into it. So I can't say what's right and what's wrong, but there are a lot of stipulations, even in so-called major. It's not as major as you might think.
So I think to me, allowing major, and I know as is been described, they already exist. That doesn't mean that they should be approved. If someone new came to the town, that type of business would be permitted in a residential district. I know there are some that currently exist in residential districts. That's unfortunate, but it is. And I'm not saying that we're going to tell them they got to move their business. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I think if someone came into the town today and wanted to put, you know, a business with trucks coming and going in a residential district, that would be problematic.
Again,
We just did, Rick Tracy moved a business off of Farmcrest where the gentleman had a concrete finishing business. And he had 3 trucks parked over there, plus, you know, equipment and things like that. And the gentleman ended up having to rent a storage unit in Avon. And that was the result of several complaints, and worked through that to get him out of that neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's exactly,
I think that there's a place for a major occupation in the town of Rush. I don't see why we would take that card off the table. Like, as Scott described, and we'll get to it. There are certain stipulations and certain guidelines they have to follow to be able to do it. And I think if they can meet that criteria, there's no reason that we should disallow. I mean, I think some people look to come to a rural area like this. I think that's what will help keep it. Some of the open space is being able to allow people to come in and purchase some of these larger pieces of ground and help pay for that by having a business that their own business ran off of that ground. I think that there is a place for it in Rush.
Just 3 more comments. One is, it's possible that this issue of existing businesses and not feeling good about telling somebody that's been doing business for 10, 30 years, they can't do it anymore, because now we're deciding to enforce the code. Having the possibility of a major home occupation, I think, would help establish the right balance, because there's so many safeguards built into that I think it would give the town board and the enforcement officers better ability to say, look, we made the town board, the town code flexible, but you have to fit within these criteria. And if you don't, I'm sorry, I don't care how long you've been here, but that's for you to decide. My second point is, it is for you folks to decide. Sooner or later, you're going to have a vote and a quorum to say, where do we end up here, right? We've given our proposal, which is based on what a number of other towns do. The third thing I wanted to say is this issue of special permits, which do they carry over or not? And we said they should carry over, because you don't want to build a 2-family residence and say, well, you can't keep it now because you sold it. Or you can't sell it for what it's worth because it may not get a special permit. I think it's Mendon that specifically says that in the case of major home occupations, which, as we're proposing, also does require a special permit, those would be a type of special permit that Mendon does not carry over. They specifically say does not run with the land. And that's an indication of that this is viewed as pretty serious stuff in a residential area. And that's the proposals in here, to have this type of special permit not carry over. And I think the town board has the authority to make that decision. Or you might decide it should carry over, but again, sooner or later, you're gonna have a quorum and decide where we fall on the spectrum.
I'm just being honest, what I think about what should be permitted in a residential district. You know, I personally think the planning board has erred
I agree with you. I
in
think there's
the
a natural
past.
reluctance on the planning board to say no.
I've been receiving maybe 3 to 4 requests from different people that one lady's clinical psychiatrist is retiring, wants to have an office in her home where she can see 2 to 3 patients a week. You know, car in for an hour, car out. Another lady is retiring as a hairdresser, and I don't know if that's the correct term, but she wants to have a chair in the basement where she can see again 3, 4 people a week. Both of them, I think, would be okay because it's not a lot of cars. But the lady with the hair business, I'd want to let the fire department know that she's got a closet full of chemicals down in the basement, you know, so that they could pre-plan accordingly. But again, people are asking, you know, can they do something like this? And right now I can tell them, you know, the residential code is up for review, so we're not doing anything right now to say, go ahead and do it.
And the proposal does state even for majors that retail sales are not allowed. So
Yeah,
if they're incidental, like if you had a beauty parlor, for example, and you sold some hair products to customers who are there anyway to get their hair done, that would be allowed for incidental sales, but not a retail operation where people are coming and going just to buy things.
And on the other hand, we've got a situation right now up on Phelps Road, where as the result of a complaint, there's a home that's got 2 accessory structures in the front yard right on the lot line where they're running a mail order business out of that home. And we're now working with them because those got to be moved. And again, it's been there for, I don't know how many years.
Is that Phelps, did you say?
Yeah.
I think I know where that is. I think I showed you the picture last time.
I think I remember seeing it.
I didn't know what it was being used for, but I could tell it wasn't residential.
yeah. I guess we could discuss that. I mean, it's you know, what the majority wants. And that's, we are still a democracy in the town of Rush, aren't we? But we can move on, I guess, because those are under definitions. And we can talk about the meat of some of these things if you want. I was just curious. We have a space in here for public utility, but there's nothing. Did we mean to have
So
something there?
there's a whole lot of definitions below that. I just didn't copy them because there's no changes below that.
Okay,
That's what that's meant to show.
okay.
You know, on the next page, if I can, short-term rental, I think that's something that we left to the town board. They have to make the determination, do they want short-term rentals or not? And depending on what that answer is, then the code could be adjusted accordingly. If I've got that right, Scott.
Yeah, so we have a section for bed and breakfast,
Yeah,
and those require a live-in host, or actually the code says the owner has to live there full-time while they're and host the residents. Short-term rental would be the case. We often could rent the whole building, the whole house. That's typically what it means. And those, we have a section that says they're just not permitted unless it fits the requirements of bed and breakfast establishment. So we have proposed not allowing short-term rentals. But I stated in my presentation last time, if the town board decides they do want to allow them, we would essentially provide you with a code for it based on Canadice. But we're proposing that bed and breakfast is as far as we go because of the hosting difference.
Okay, and so that would be like an Airbnb, in other words.
Airbnb can do either. So you could advertise a room as a bed and breakfast in Airbnb, or that's typically what Airbnb is used for. Vrbo is the one that's known for renting whole houses.
The whole house,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm not saying you couldn't do it with Airbnb, but Vrbo is typically the one that you rent
Vrbo,
whole
okay.
houses.
So what are we saying here then, under this short-term rental
Well,
section?
this is just a definition. If you look at the code section, which is just about as long as a definition, it says they're not allowed.
Okay, okay.
And it's up for you folks to decide.
So, on page 8, a couple of things. It
I had-
starts out, go ahead, I'm sorry, did you have others?
That was me, Gene.
Oh,
I just had one question before we get to page 8. On
Okay.
Page 6,
yep,
in the residential districts where we get into customary farming activities. I
Yeah.
think I understand this, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly, Scott, on number 4. For the indoor growing operations not being larger than 10,000 square feet. We're going back to the definition of indoor growing, which
Yes.
is primarily with
Artificial light.
artificial lighting. That's what that's talking about.
Right, that was the intent. Again, this is our proposal. And
Right.
what you folks want to do is,
Well, that's, I was just
Yep.
clarifying
Absolute-
that when you say
abs-
indoor growing, that's
Yep.
for,
so you just have to be aware that definitions are extremely important,
yeah.
right? And anytime you see something in the code that you're not sure of, or even if you think you know, it's always good to go back to the definition and see, what am I really?
Right, well, I read this and then I was like, I better
Yep.
go back and look
Yep.
through, and that's
Yep.
what I
Yep.
went
Yep.
back and
And
did
I want to
that.
make sure, because I'm pretty sure that Glenna and company went through all of the right procedures at the time. So I'm pretty sure they got more than 10,000 square feet under artificial growing.
Now,
I think that's, the opaque panels too, it's not all.
my question on that is because now that brings up a good point on that, because their primary, or I guess their primary lighting would be natural light, right? Because of the plastic.
Right.
So they're covered because they have majority natural, that's not their primary source of light, is not artificial.
Yes.
So they're covered that under that. That's what I assume by reading that.
And they're also legally pre-existing at this point.
Yeah.
So we're looking at essentially an indoor growing space.
We're looking at something like they proposed in Webster, where you were gonna have a 3-acre pole barn growing tomatoes with black light.
Right. Something kind of like what was proposed or at least investigated in the town of Rush 10 months ago or so,
Yeah, at the corner of
251 and 15.
Yeah.
Partly commercial and partly residential, I think. Somewhere
Okay.
in that border.
Yeah. But that was a predominantly, I believe, at least from the plans, was a predominantly,
Indoor. I
Indoor.
think,
Yes.
yeah. But one other comment, I think, could one of these 2 million square foot buildings be built on a lot next to me? And it's not the fact of the lot size, but it's gotta be a big flat area. And there aren't an awful lot of them in Rush.
No.
You know,
No,
so while you can worry all you want about a big building on your boundary, but it's unlikely if you're on a hill.
yeah, that's for sure. There's not a lot of flat land.
is this section okay from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't any major changes other than just some corrections, and then the indoor growing was the only definition, going down through there.
Okay.
Now, the other one, I did have one more, I guess. So all shelters provided for livestock, fowl, or fur-bearing animals and storage of manure shall be at least 100 feet from any property line. I'm I guess-
Are you into the code somewhere? It's not
yes, yeah,
definition.
we're past definitions, Scott. I'm sorry, I should have said that. So I'm on page 7 at this point. 7. Oh, 120-7.
Or A,
4B, 4A, yep.
Okay.
4A. Now, I guess I would have to look and see. What, is there any guidelines from Ag and Markets? I know there was discussion of having them for input on some of this stuff.
Yeah, and so this may be one of those things where if it's in an ag district, maybe this does not apply, like a lot of other things.
And I think it would only, from how I understood it, it would only not apply. I guess it would almost be like having the zoning board look at it for a variance. If it got to the
Yeah.
where if it was possible for the farmer to do this and not limit his operation,
Mhm.
then it would be understandable that there was a restriction there. But if it was not possible and you would be taking away production land that was, good production agricultural land, then you could be within that,
Yeah,
was kind of how I understood it, but
I'll simply say that it's probably half the towns that I looked at do have something like 100 feet requirement in that regard. Some go as low as 50, some go as low as 150, and some like ours don't have it. There is an internal contradiction in that A section we're talking about, because the old code said any building housing a commercial livestock operation shall also comply with the setback requirements of chapter 120. And then what we added was all shelters provided for livestock, fowl, or fur-bearing animals, storage of manure shall be at least 100 feet. Well, those two aren't really compatible, so
Yeah.
we need to get rid of the other one if we're going with 100 feet, with 100 feet.
Let's be practical too. If you're going to build a commercial livestock facility on a piece of property that you can't maintain 100 feet, I gotta ask why. I mean, that's an awfully big facility that you're gonna be.
it doesn't necessarily have to be that big.
It's gonna be big enough that it's gonna be obnoxious to your neighbors. I mean, it's not already there and they didn't build the house next to you, but if you're coming in and you're gonna put 20 head of cattle within 50 feet of your neighbor's house, that's not very neighborly.
I don't disagree with you, but I would like to see, I mean, if Ag and Markets law overrules that,
What I would rather see is you come in and get a variance for that. Just because that's your avenue to get around that, if you will.
yeah. Well, could we leave it and then say subject to Ag and Markets law like we've done in the past in some of the code?
I'm okay with that, but even if Ag and Market says, I'd be surprised if Ag and Market says you could come in and put that big of a facility.
I would have to I think I looked at it, John, I would have to double check, but they said if there was accentuating circumstances, basically like for a zoning variance, then, but if they came in and looked at it and said, there's no issue with you putting it 200 feet away, you can be at that 100 feet.
Yeah,
That's what they would come and do. So,
yeah, I'm okay with, based on what Ag and Market say.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're kind of doing with other sectors.
Right.
that's a good idea.
Nope, that sounds good.
I interrupted you, Gene, and you said, I think you were on to page 8 before I stepped in front of you.
Oh, yeah, no, feel free, it's not
I-
my meeting, I want you to
Yeah.
talk about things as we move down. I didn't see issues particularly with other things, but you raised good points there, so it's good. On page 8, I'm looking at number 5B5, where recreation facilities are kind of crossed out. And it's where, there's a proposal here in green, are proposing to allow membership clubs only in rural residential commercial districts.
Which we don't have
Um,
yet. And maybe never will.
I'm sorry?
We don't have those now.
We don't
Maybe-
have
they
them.
Maybe never will, but that's up to you folks.
And I'm just, my 2 cents on that is, okay, so we have some activities going on now that I think are allowed currently, probably by special permit.
Yes.
And I say that's enough when those permits run out or
Well,
they move.
They won't run out unless the person.
The use
stops
stops.
Operation.
Yes, the use stops.
Or violates some part of the special permit that they get it rescinded. But typically would have to stop using it for 6 months.
Correct.
Yep.
So I think, to me, that's good enough.
Yep.
That we don't need another zone.
The other
Because
problem
the
we have
zone will
is-
be there forever. As opposed to something operating
Well,
under
that-
a special permit.
That'll be a whole nother subject. Remember, those rural residential commercial districts that we proposed were to accommodate the 2 gun clubs. Rich Gravel selling things other than gravel operations. Burn Balance. And that recreation club, that's the Macon Tracks,
Mhm.
car racing. So that was an attempt to legalize those, legitimize them without question in the future.
But that car track is legal.
It is now.
They were given a
Right,
special permit.
Right. It is legal now.
Yeah.
Correct.
What about Wildwood?
Wildwood falls under golf courses and
A membership club.
But that was excluded in this. That's why I questioned it, right? Membership clubs were excluded.
well, we're looking at that as falling under golf clubs and what else? That may be in an R30.
Okay. I see it there, you know, it's
Yeah.
120
Country
dash
golf
80.
courses and country clubs. So what we added for that was explicitly stated, you can have restaurants and food service facilities that are, incidental or a part of those operations.
Just out of curiosity, and I don't know off the top of my head, is Wildwood in an R30?
Yes.
That
Yes,
is there.
Yes.
And that's open to the public. That's not,
It's both, right? So it's a membership and open to the public. There are
Yes.
memberships there too, so it's.
yeah,
That was
right,
my,
the club is, yeah. I'm talking about the restaurant part.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We have Southern Meadows too on 251.
Yeah. And that's R30. there
Right,
it is. Everyone.
Yeah, R30 starts right behind the first row of houses on 15A here.
Anyway, I guess I'm just opposed to creating a new zone.
Understood? We were just looking for a way to
Yeah, no,
legitimize what we already have.
I know. Point number 8. Commercial horse stables and the like. We have dog kennels crossed out, but we have indoor dog training facilities.
No, I didn't intend to cross out dog kennels.
Oh, maybe I
We
did.
added dog
Yeah, I don't
to the
see it on
kennels.
mine.
Crossed out?
No, it's not. It just says and is crossed out on my sheet.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
because
Commercial
we
horse
did
stables.
add indoor dog training facilities.
yes,
Here, and I know Jean's issue because she lives next to one. But the issue is that the planning board allowed 2 dog training facilities under the umbrella of kennels, right? You can argue whether that was right or not, but it was done. So.
but
yeah,
not really. Not really, because there are no kennels, there are no overnight
Right. I'm just saying
boarding.
the planning board did allow it because it was used for dogs under the auspices of being a kennel, but
Right-
I'm
right
not,
now-
I'm
right
not
now-
arguing, I'm not arguing what's correct. I'm just saying the planning board did it.
But they are not permitted to board dogs overnight.
Okay.
I'm telling you what's in the
Be-
special
be-
permit.
Agreed, agreed.
without getting into particulars, we've got an enforcement situation now where a resident has 18 dogs stored outside and trying to clean that up.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
And thank you, because that's a nuisance to the
Very
residents,
much.
to the neighborhood. In my
Correct.
opinion,
The code is very silent on it, so the code committee looked at it last week and I'm finishing it up very quickly because we don't have good language right now to clean that. So
but what was permitted when that was put, when that use was allowed over there? Was there under a special permit? How does that happen?
Well, I assume that the town code doesn't specify any maximum number of dogs a resident can have.
Yeah, it was not a commercial, it wasn't, I mean, it was,
and what we're looking at is proposing that you can have 3 licensed canines on one residence, and anything above and beyond that, you're gonna have to get a special permit for a kennel and, right now, we're getting them basically on noise and a couple other things that are kind of related.
never heard those dogs bark.
Because that's interesting, because they went in around the same time. How does one resident get to build that enormous building and all of that stuff? I see it when I go past. And no one says anything.
That's just it. Nobody says it.
Well, I'm just saying, there was like,
We've got.
and I'm
several-
sorry, things, and I'm not saying you, John, but I'm saying, I didn't see that,
No, I've got several violations that are written, not violations, the barn didn't get finished, but the permit got extended so that it could get finished. The swimming pool didn't get finished, but the permit got extended so that it could be finished. And like right now, all I need for the pool is to see the lockable gate and the pool alarm, which was put away for the winter, so the permit's still good. We'll get that taken care of, but I think the dogs kind of accumulated over time.
This is the property that the house burned down a couple of years
Well,
ago,
it didn't
correct?
burn down. There was
But
a
there
fire.
was a
in the
fire,
kitchen.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's got a
So-
couple different breeds of dogs,
I don't.
like,
know
and
what- I don't
puppies
know.
is from what I understood.
I haven't been over there.
Yeah.
Rick and Mike are dealing with that
Yeah.
right now.
the other facility near me, they are not permitted overnight. You can look up the special permit anytime, or
I
if you
don't
need
know
to
where
find
I
it
don't know where the other one is near you.
on Honey Eye Falls, 5 Points Road.
Okay, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. If you need a copy of the special permit, I'd be glad to share it.
It'll
Give it to Rick.
It would be in the file.
It's,
Yeah.
it's in the file.
One
My opinion, again, is that we should not permit dog kennels in a residential zone, period. And by kennels, I mean overnight boarding of dogs. I know that the planning board in the past has denied one or more kennels in town for that reason.
It's 2 that I know of.
Yeah, me too. So how do we? I think we can't be arbitrary, or it shouldn't be, it just is not fair. But I think that we should just not allow that in the town, in a residential district. It's just not fair to everybody else who has to listen to dogs barking all night.
Yeah, again, I can't say what's right or wrong. This was based mostly on what's already been done. If you want a little bit of background, I mean, special permits do go into some detail, or so the planning board is supposed to consider the impact on the neighborhood, right? So the 2, and I think there are a couple of permitted dog kennels in town with a special permit before my time. I'm not aware of what the details are. There were 2 during my time that we did not approve. One was a situation, it was a barn behind a residence that the prior owner had sold and built a house on the lot next door. and then wanted to use the barn they had behind the house they just sold for dog kennels, and the people they sold it to got a little upset. That was a case where the neighbor was sitting in the audience complaining, and we said, okay, we agree with you. It's too close. No. The other case was actually in Biondo Court in, 1.5, whatever they are, acre lots. And
Right.
a person with a special needs child who was very good at taking care of dogs wanted to let her have a business and earn some money in her life by having kennel there. And a number of neighbors showed up. You can imagine the closeness there, and said, no way, Jose. And we said, okay, there's too much neighborhood disagreement. So,
Mhm.
I mean, that's a case where I think the special permitting process did work. That's not to say it couldn't fail.
Again, I have to say, I mean, there might be areas in Rush where, and that's where the planning board would step in, but there might be areas in Rush where it would work, and if they're in an enclosed building, and you may be able to come up with a way where your neighbors wouldn't hear, it wouldn't be a disruption to them. I don't know, I guess I haven't lived next to a dog kennel. I know
Yeah,
I had a friend in high school that her dad was big into bear hunting, and he had 8 or 10 hound dogs. And it wasn't every night, but there was a couple times where something got them going, and it was pretty loud, but they lived up way far away from anybody, so. I could see there being a spot where it could work, and I guess that would be up to the planning board's discretion to make sure that it was something that was doable.
There are towns that have a page of code covering dog kennels, maybe 2 pages. This is one case where our definition, we didn't do that, but we did add a few things to the definition, like it must be within a fully enclosed building and have no more than 15 dogs. I mean, you got to draw the limit somewhere. So this is a case where, because we didn't have a code section, we did put some code in the definition. That's not to say it's right. And again, you folks are gonna have to hash that out. But this is what we proposed. It was an attempt to limit and clarify what already was allowed. We didn't add a new capability in this case. Other than the dog training, which the planning board in the past has allowed anyway. And the other thing I'll point out, we did say, if you're gonna have a dog kennel, it has to be in a residential area. It has to be on the same lot where the operator lives. Because some of these special permitted things, there's nothing to say it couldn't be done without a residence. So that would have really been like a business, and the owner wouldn't have been there and maybe not have cared what happened. So we did at least add that. Now,
If you're,
maybe the accessory building law would have prevented a dog kennel on a lot without a residence, but we wanted to be clear that we don't intend these things to be on a lot without a residence.
Okay. I'm just throwing out my opinion on how I feel about that. Being allowable. And you could think about it or discuss it.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that there is a place where that could work. And I think the planning board should be able to make that
I think
decision.
the best I can do is kind of add some green comments to saying, this is an area of contention, so that it's flagged. And then when you folks get to the point of voting on specifics, you'll have to hash it out.
Would there be anything, Scott, that you could put in there? We already have that it's got to be a fully enclosed building. Could there be anything in there where you could have some sort of measure of soundproofing?
Decibel level not to exceed.
Something, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know what the level might be. I don't know if you have any idea either. there are some codes just around noise in general, where there will be requirements. 4 decibel at the lot line and that sort of thing. We could probably look up some of those. We can kind of search on noise and
Because that would
multi-code.
apply to anything.
anything.
Correct. I mean, if you're building a building and you're having dogs in there, I'm assuming you're gonna wanna have it comfortable. The insulation, but I mean, you may be doing it just by
Yeah.
general construction of the building too. So I don't know, but
Okay,
the next one I had on the same page is going down to number 9. Where we're getting into the commercial vehicles, and I know we've spent a bit of time on this already, and I see we've added some basically axle sizes, I guess, but just 4-wheel vehicles. I'm still having trouble. I think that we need to allow more than one commercial vehicle, especially if it's a work issued type vehicle. Just driving around just from work to my house, I've seen a couple where the guy has, it's an F-150 and maybe an F-250, but they're both work trucks. I don't know if it's him and his wife or maybe one truck isn't running, so he's got another, but it's 2 commercial
Or
trucks.
is it him and an employee?
I don't, I guess I don't know if it's his, I can't say whether if it's his own business. It doesn't, I guess it doesn't appear that way to me, but I could be wrong, but it's 2 small pickup trucks. They're not big bucket trucks or anything like that. The other one I have is 2 Monroe County deputies living at the same house, and they got 2 cruisers parked in that driveway.
Those aren't commercial vehicles.
But you're going on, they look, I mean, they got insignias on the side. They're not a normal SUV or sedan or a pickup truck parked there either. So I don't know. I think that there's a place, and there's at times there is a need to be able to have 2 commercial vehicles. I mean, we talked about it. I mean, a husband and wife could work for 2 different companies where they both have company vehicles. What about if a wife sells Mary Kay makeup and her husband works for a construction? I mean, there's,
If she's
or
selling-
vice versa.
If she's
Yeah,
selling
there you
Mary
go.
Kay and driving an F-250, I got a question.
but they have the Mary Kay pink Cadillac or whatever it was I used to see around, but I'm just,
That's not a commercial vehicle.
okay, but I mean, so when I looked at the definitions of commercial vehicles, it was anything that had any sort of writing on the side that said that, right? I mean, isn't that in the definition of the commercial vehicle?
It was, let
So-
me just say this, you're right in pointing out the problem here. When we went through was it 12017, the outside parking?
Yeah.
We left it that the code committee owes this board a review of commercial vehicle parking in residential districts specifically. Because we got the understanding then that the board wasn't real happy with what we proposed. And this was already issued to you, so we did not attempt to upgrade it. In fact, our very next meeting, which is in about 2.5 weeks, that is going to be one of our primary topics,
Okay.
is to list everything we have so far said about commercial parking in residential districts. And what do we now propose with a new understanding? So that is an action item for us, and it is not complete. What we have here, you should not view as a final package or even a final proposal. There are essentially 3 levels of commercial parking residential districts. One is an employee, so somebody works for another company and they're asked to bring home a pickup truck, or maybe it's a small flatbed, or who knows what, a landscaping trailer. That's one where the person's just an employee. The other one would be what's right for a minor home occupation, and then what's reasonable for a major home occupation. Those 3 levels is what we want to provide you with as new proposals.
And I still have the basic issue of a lot of pickup trucks have commercial license plates on them, so does that make them a commercial? And
They all say commercial.
oh, yeah,
Which ones
mine,
don't?
mine had volunteer fire department plates on, it. But
Well, yeah, but I mean, majority of license plates are, say, commercial
so
on them.
does that make it a commercial?
No, but what was defined in the code makes it a commercial vehicle in the eyes of the town of Rogers. I would say, not with the license, I mean,
It's more the use as opposed to the license.
Last time I registered a truck. New. Which is cheaper, commercial or regular?
yeah,
And whatever it is what I got.
yeah, I mean. Some of ours have agriculture on them, but I switched mine back to
Okay.
commercial. Cause it was cheaper to go commercial like Dan
Yeah.
said.
About the Cadillac in a barn, when we get that registered.
We don't register that one.
Well, the code specifically says you're allowed to put in the barn what you want, as long as it's not sitting outside.
See, here, Scott, leave me alone.
Always the
So that's being more to come on
More to
that,
come on
okay,
that. That is clearly one of the things we owe you.
okay.
I'm not saying you with absolute certainty you'll like what we propose again, but we'll come up with a new proposal.
So, moving on to 120-8. Which is the R30 and R5 residential districts. Section B2, golf courses and country clubs. And we started talking about this. And this is under, this is permitted, this is with a special permit in these districts.
Yes.
And then where you talk about accessory uses such as restaurants and other food facilities primarily for persons using the primary facilities. So would that preclude, say, Wildwood from having the restaurant open to the public?
That's a good question.
Really, I mean, the people who are there to go to eat are using the facilities. Right?
But you don't have to be a member and play a round of golf to eat at the restaurant.
No, because the restaurant is part of the facility
Yeah,
and you're gonna go there for a ball or a whatever. And so you are using the facilities as a guest. I would think that would cover it.
Yeah, we could get rid of the word primarily.
yeah, that's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
that might make
Do we
sense.
want to say primarily for,
Because I mean, to some degree, the restaurant could support just a whole operation. There's no reason you want to prevent that. They're gonna have it anyway.
You could take out everything primarily and after,
That's what I
and
was,
just leave it at
Yep.
other food facilities.
Yep. Okay. And by the way, Southern Meadows has food as well.
I
I've
did
seen it
not know that.
advertised. Never been there.
I think it's kind of limited.
they have a restaurant or is it like a stand?
I played golf there once and I think they have hot dogs. Not sure it's locked down.
Number 4, I guess we could continue to talk about major home occupations. I would prefer to delete it, but that's, you can think about that. And then number 5, where we talk about the private airstrips. And again, we talked about it earlier. Do we want to stipulate what aircraft may be permitted?
I'd be interested to see what we
Right.
get back from
Yeah.
the state.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just like, it's just repeating
Yeah.
here, so.
Yeah,
Sister
for
lives next to.
Definitions now, we're actually.
Right, yeah.
My sister lives over by Dick Ski's house, and I've never heard her complain about the plane. It did take off once when I was driving down Schofield Road though.
Scare you?
Yeah, It's right there.
Go right over.
For the gravel mining, I know we have 2 active gravel mining operations in the town of Rush. One is actually, I think headquarters is based out of Mendon, but I believe the mining actually does come into Rush. The way that this is written, does that allow those existing mines to continue to expand?
It's, well, it's intended to, so.
Coming across pretty soon.
Right, that's what I was, yeah.
Where is this?
Heidelberg, yeah, is not yet into Rush, but they have a
Good.
special permit that allows them to move into
Okay.
Rush.
Yeah.
This was intended, I think that's what it says, or with a special permit prior to enactment of this law. That was
Okay.
Intended to
they
not
got
put
that
anybody
wild.
existing out of business or change their plans.
So, but I mean, I guess I don't know what
Yeah,
that special
okay,
permit
sorry.
covers. They own a lot of land in Rush, so does that special permit cover all land that they currently own in Rush, or does it, I don't know if there's. If they, you know, I guess I'm trying to think if it's gonna stop them from going beyond, if that permit limits them to less than what their land is, not what they own now.
I think that'd be more of a DEC permit then.
Yeah.
The DEC would oversee that.
There's multiple levels of permits. Special permit is probably the least of their problem.
Right,
So I don't think, I think they did buy a farm that goes all the way out to Works Road or Oak Openings.
yeah, it kind
but-
of skirts
but-
around that one piece.
But I know there's no intent to put a road coming out that way. They will continue to use the road that comes out on number 6 road. I don't remember the details of the special permit around area, but I don't think it comes anywhere near Oak Openings Works Road. Is my
Yeah.
recollection.
Well, I was just curious, I mean, they have all that land, it says that, you know, basically. Prior to that law, so once this is enacted, if they come forward, say in another 10 years, or I don't know how much more gravel they figure they even have there, I heard that they're. Kind of getting to the end of what they got, but that's rumor.
What I heard back in whatever it was, 2019 or so, they thought they'd be there. They wouldn't even be getting to Rush for 25 to 50 years.
Okay,
Now, they can only mine what is good limestone, and the limestone is less deep as you get to Rush. So
Yeah.
the level comes up. So they start to run out of elevation to dig into. But I can't tell you any details.
okay. Well, I guess what I was saying is. I guess. If they own more ground and it's not in that special permit, when this law happens, does that
Then it
stop?
says they couldn't do it,
They
right?
can't do it.
Right.
Okay,
That's what this would say.
I don't know anything about mining or how that, if they. There's someone that says. I don't know if there's a way that they can say. No. We own this,
Yeah.
we have the
I'm
mineral,
gonna kind of
As
bet that they
As
could-
Luther said, DEC has
That's-
an awful lot to say.
that's what I was wondering, so. I guess,
And they certainly came to us for a special permit that recognized that that was a requirement.
yeah,
And I don't remember ever saying that they had a way around it, but they were very nice. They didn't give any indication that they intended to bypass the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't answer your question other than that. But I will say that when we had that special permit, I went through the whole thing. Not one person came to see the meeting, and not one to the public hearing, and not one person made a comment. And I'm
Okay.
thinking, here's a company that's gonna be literally blasting next on a property next to somebody else's property, and none of those people who were adjacent showed up. I was amazed.
yeah, and I heard that there was even trouble. during some of the last time they went a significant amount deeper, that a lot of people's water tables dropped
Yeah,
in that
was not
area.
good.
Yeah,
They had a, my
they,
understanding, they actually dug some new wells for some people.
That's what I had
Did it
heard,
for
I guess.
everybody along.
they maintain, based on all their hydraulic studies or whatever the term is, that it does not affect the water table of anybody in Rush. Because of the way things are located and flow. I
Coincidental.
mean, your intuition says, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
But they had a lot of technical data to back up that statement, which I couldn't disagree with or approve.
Right. Okay, I just wanted a little bit more understanding.
When those wells went dry.
That was 2011, 2012, maybe.
Try somewhere.
Okay. Number 6. I was just thinking where you say town facilities. And I was maybe putting in there town-owned facilities.
Could be. I don't have a problem with that.
Moving down. On waste disposal, sanitary landfill and dumping operations, et cetera, et cetera. Is that part of our mission? 120-54. For tonight,
Yeah, I think we were,
okay,
what page are you on there, Gina?
I'm on page 14.
Yeah, this admittedly is a whole nother addition to the code. Again, it's based on, it's copied from some other towns, but
Yeah,
it is new. Particularly part about refuse containers, receptacles.
right, yep. Under garbage accumulation, B. I just made a question to myself, what about natural fertilizer materials?
Composting, so to speak, or
Yeah, or, no person shall dump, deposit, or shall be used for dumping, blah, 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 or offensive smelling substances within. It just, I guess it could
yeah,
fall under that, but
what comes to my mind is manure. right?
Yeah.
So this was not intended, I don't think, to cover manure, but when you talk about offensive smelling substances, how could
I
you
guess that would
not
be in
end
there.
up there?
Okay,
But there again, I would guess that again, Market's law covers some of that. I know when this was inserted, I for one was not thinking about farm manure.
yeah, okay. Under D. We say here, no such refuse and recycle receptacle shall be kept near any public place or highway longer than may be necessary for the removal of the contents thereof. Do we want to talk about a time frame Like if somebody leaves it out for an extra day, is they in violation?
Yeah, this was intentionally left vague
Okay,
so that it would be obvious if somebody's leaving it there 24/7, week after week. But not to have neighbors who don't like their other neighbor complaining every time somebody leaves it out for an extra day,
right,
or have any basis to complain about it. So it's almost inherent in having this kind of code that it's hard to say what that time should be.
right.
But at the same time, it's aimed at people who had no intention of moving their totes or dumpsters or whatever back to their house,
Mm-hmm.
unless it's hidden and nobody knows or cares.
I just wanted to go back a page. I had made some notes on the accessory building part.
Okay,
I was just curious what everybody else thought about this. I think that in a town like ours where we do have some larger lots, that I could see a need for somebody to have an accessory building to maintain that property. Say they just bought property out in the country, maybe they just want it for hunting, maybe they have trails and they want to have a building to store a little tractor or something to keep it protected and go out and maintain their trails and play and hike and stuff like that. I understand the fear that, you know, someone's gonna build a building, they're not gonna come, they're not gonna maintain it. And I don't think we should do it for every property, but is there any interest or thought in maybe setting like a size limit and then allowing an accessory building on a property like that after, if they exceed that acreage? Would there be any thought to doing something like that?
There's somebody for the planning board right now that's got 30 acres. Wants to put up a building to store a tractor to maintain the trails.
Okay, so that's kind of sort of an example of what I'm thinking. So my thought is we understand Rush is kind of a wide open property. We really want to kind of keep it that way. Well, if we have people coming in and they're buying these properties, but we're not giving them an avenue to enjoy that property or maintain that property, then we're kind of fighting ourselves a little bit.
These are residential districts.
I-
And a residential district is for residents.
And I understand, but in some of our residential districts, we have very large areas of land.
Right, but we've thrown people off of properties for building a building without having a primary structure if it wasn't agricultural.
And that's what I'm getting at, is I think that, you know, I'm not saying if you own 2 acres or 3 acres, you can put a building there and leave. But say you have 15 or 20 acres or greater, and you want to put a building out there so that you can put a little compact 4-wheel drive or a bigger tractor, who cares how big your tractor is, but you want to have something that you can go out there and maintain and do stuff. I don't see why we wouldn't allow, I see, I guess what you're saying where, you know, that's but it's not a typical residential area. It's not like a residential area in Henrietta.
We don't classify it as not kind of sort of a residential.
Well, that's why I'm saying we put a guideline, even though it's a residential area, you could put a guideline. If you have X amount of acres, then we could consider, I mean, I guess, I'm not saying maybe it's something that you'd have to get a special use permit for. But you could have that avenue there if you meet this criteria first.
As Scott has said, it's up to you guys what you want in the code.
So let me give you a real world example. When we bought 12 acres in Rush in 2002, I wanted to do what you said. I wanted to bring in a shed, was 12 by 20, so I could store some equipment. And the word I got back was you can't do that. It's an accessory building without a primary residence. I said, but you could go to the zoning board of appeals and see what they can do for you. And the zoning board didn't feel good about it. And they said, I mean, they didn't feel good about denying me. They said, well, you give us a $500 deposit. And if in 2 years you didn't build a house, you use your $500 to tear down your shed. So we built a house a year later and it worked out fine for us. But I mean, that's a possibility. You could have something that says you get a time limit. It would mean the trouble of enforcement and that sort of thing.
Well, I'm not even saying
Yeah, probably not.
in lieu of a residence being
yep,
built.
yep.
I'm just thinking that somebody that just wants to enjoy the property that lives, you know, it maybe doesn't have the trailer to drive the equipment back and forth or the space at their residence to keep the equipment there. I don't know what the situation would be, but
So I'll tell you what the downside of that might be, and that once you allow a building there, it's very hard to control what it's used for. So you'll have people staying overnight, you'll have people going to the bathroom outside, using porta potties, using little things inside the shelter. And I speak from experience. Because we stayed overnight in it when we were building our house and clearing the lot. So you do lose control by letting them have a building.
I think, Dan, I can think of a couple of them that, they did that, they built the buildings, garages and so forth, and then they didn't maintain them, they didn't come around. All based on the same theory as they're gonna have a little tractor and so forth. One right down the road from my house, and I remember one over on East River Road, they brought horses there, but they never lived there. I like to see something in there, so like if a farmer wanted to build a barn there, he had property in the town, but he owned this property, he wanted to put a barn up, keep a combine or whatever, and I'd like to see that ability for him.
That's allowed.
That is allowed. Specifically, we did that
Yeah.
Yeah.
a year ago or so.
All right, so I'm jumping ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's good, good.
Yeah, there was just a thought that I had, and as Gina said throughout the night,
Yep.
it's
Well,
really based on a board decision.
And that's specifically that issue, and it clearly is an issue, bone of contention, is why we put the very firm wording in there. This is what we understand the code means now, but it's enforced through definitions. If it's an accessory structure, well, it can't be accessory unless there's a principal building to be accessory to,
Right.
which is how you come out with the fact that accessory structures are not allowed without a principal building. So we just wanted to be clear that that's the case. It's not to say that that is where all you folks think we should be.
The other one I had still going on that building. The placement of any such accessory building or structure shall conform to all separate buildings. It shall not be placed nearer to the highway or the lot line than is permitted. I'm sorry, there was one in here. The accessory structure shall not be placed nearer to the front lot line than the principal building. So basically what that is saying is that accessory building can't be in front of that front line.
Right, because then it becomes looking like an accessory lot instead of a residential lot.
Although we just had one that went before the zoning board where the accessory structure was about 500 feet off the road. And it was in front of the house.
Well, that's kind of what I'm
That
getting
was a
at.
That was a zoning variance based on the specific conditions of that lot.
Because there are certain properties where they're
So-
big, long, or
Yes,
that building could be,
yes.
the house sits so far
But
back.
you couldn't see the accessory structure from the road either.
Okay, so I guess the way that I look at it is there are instances where you would have to be, I mean,
And that's,
Gene, I'm not picking on you,
no,
but I think you have an accessory building that's closer to the road than your,
it is existing and put
it's
up
just the
in
way it
1960.
works. Right, I get it, but I mean, there
And
are,
I can't tell you what went up first.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's instances where, I don't know, I just hate to say no to everything, but I
Well,
guess there's
that's
an
why we got the
avenue.
variance process.
Yeah.
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 So remember in my presentation last time, I said two things in this regard. One is that some laws you just write for the 1% of people
Right.
who would abuse common sense.
Right,
And the other one is you can't write laws that cover every situation, and
Yeah.
that's the purpose of the variance process.
Yeah, yeah, the picture you showed, that was quite egregious,
Yeah,
that being in
yeah.
front, so.
This question, with the wetland deal that came up this last year here, do we want to have anything that obviously an accessory building cannot be built in a wetland or?
Well, if you're talking about the flood zones, that's a given. Any application that comes in for any type of structure now, we changed the building permit application and I have to check it against the maps. Make sure that the accessory structure isn't in the floodplain. I've had one situation where somebody's come in to test that. And in this case, we can actually move the accessory structure on the property and get it out of the flood zone.
So the question was specific about wetlands, and a requirement of the site plan process is to show features like wetlands and slopes on the site plan. And for certain type of, whether it's state or federal wetlands, you can't even build within 100 feet of the wetland, let alone in it.
Right, and we've got DEC wetlands and we've got Army Corps wetland that both get addressed by the site plan.
Okay,
Scott, I think Gene touched on this a little bit, but could you explain it a little bit better, number 3, in that same accessory building
Yeah.
section there? Just, because it kind of sounds like what Gene said, where it can't exceed the size of the.
Yep. So in my last presentation, I had a slide that talked about that these sets of rules came from Webster. And not to say what any other town does is right, but we went through the process of actually mapping out on a chart that was in that presentation that showed as the allowed size of accessory buildings as a function of the primary building size and different lines showing the function of different lot sizes. This set of requirements, I'm losing my voice. It says it could be, you're allowed to build accessory buildings or more than one with that up to a total that is the larger of a percentage of the lot size or the building size. So this is the accessory building size is fundamentally controlled by the lot size. The bigger your lot size, the bigger your accessory building can be. It's like I say, it's in that chart that's in that prior presentation, and there is another written summary in there. But I know that I think for any lot bigger than 5.7 acres, I think you could get the maximum 5,000 square feet. So that's a pretty big barn. It's 50 by 100. It steps down from there, but still rather reasonable. On the other end, if you have a relatively small lot, but a big primary residence, that minimum is actually kicked up by the size of the primary residence. But it's only on.
The land is
low
the
side.
default.
The land is by far the biggest controller.
Yeah.
And it's quite reasonable. Frankly, if I were you, I would question this idea of 2 accessory buildings, a maximum of 2. Maybe that should be 3, for example.
Right.
But
Now, is that a cumulative square footage on those?
it is cumulative for the square footage. Yeah, so it'd be the sum total of all of the accessory buildings.
Okay.
But I know that I said even on the low end was quite reasonable, like the minimum house size on a minimum R20 lot, you'd still be able to have a 20 by 20 detached garage, does not include attached garages. And on a minimum sized building in an R30 minimum lot, you'd be allowed something like a 20 by 30 detached garage. And then it goes up from there all the way up to 5,000 square feet. So it seems pretty reasonable, and it's subject again to the variance process if somebody had a real need.
And
For
the
some
biggest
reason.
one I've issued was Werner's. He did a 136 by 48 foot barn, which is about 6,500 square foot. But it was a large property and it was all agricultural. So
Yeah, this wouldn't affect ag at all.
most of them aren't any.
Yeah, right. Can't think of many that are.
Well, that greenhouse that went up here next to Clovis, that's pretty large.
Yeah, that's not that big. I can't remember exactly. It's like 120 by 120 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
something. I mean, but that, again, that's on the larger size.
Yeah.
What we approved.
So I mean, I could send each of you that chart.
If you wouldn't
That
mind,
I would, no problem at all.
Okay.
I'd appreciate that. We probably have it because I think the slide I think the
It-
whole
it is on the
presentation
slide.
got sent to us.
Yeah,
so we
you,
can get up
you
there
you
too.
would have it. It would be in the code committee section of the document center, right? But I'll send you just the chart by itself.
Yeah. The other one I had is some of the, what if, what if you have like a ranch house and you wanted to build a barn? You can't exceed the height of the primary building, so. What if you had a ranch house, but you had a big camper that you wanted to store in this barn? Do you need a taller barn?
Well, we could get rid of that height requirement. Again, that was copied from Webster. You'd
Okay.
still be subject to the maximum
Yeah,
35
that's a
feet.
good point.
Yeah,
We
but,
probably shouldn't say that, right? Maybe that's,
yeah,
It was again aimed, I'm sure, at the idea of you want the lot to appear residential, not be
Right.
overwhelmed by a very high barn. But if you wanted to scratch that,
yeah, it was just something that I got thinking, I was like, man, some of these people, they don't want a big house, but they got a big camper, they want to park inside.
I thought of the same thing. Is that reasonable? I should get rid of that for everybody.
Yeah,
so where is that again?
number 4, C.
Number 4. Oh, okay.
See,
And just cross
Yeah,
that out.
we could scratch a number 4 completely because the 35 maximum height is throughout the town anyway.
Yeah.
And then,
And what about no more than 2?
yeah, I was just gonna go to that. What are
we
your
wanna-
guys' thoughts on,
I think 3 is rational.
I would have to agree.
That's
Well-
their Phelps Road. I think they've got 5.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of, so we've got a lot of farmettes, right? And you got a little barn or maybe for your chickens here, and then what if you had a little pole barn and then some other
Then a
little,
A
that would
detached
be an
garage.
ag exemption. too.
not for,
Yeah, for the if it was purely for agricultural, I'd probably give it to. you.
oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Even if it was just not like a commercial,
Oh, yeah,
just
yeah.
a,
But we did that down at 8003 East River Road. He's got that little shack where he takes care of his trees and his beehives. Just a real small.
he told me that he was as our code defines it, a commercial
Well, he
farming operation.
is, he is. He makes more than 10,000 a
Right.
year off of that, but that structure that he's got is, man-made, handmade, and it's,
But I'm saying
size
for
is-
like a general resident that puts up a
If
chicken
if it
coop.
was agricultural, I think it'd be okay.
Okay,
That seems to be our default that, we can.
okay. Well, I just wasn't sure. I guess my understanding was that they were covered under that as a commercial ag enterprise. I wasn't sure about residential that had 5 chickens or whatever. I don't know, whatever the number would be. So, okay.
Well, I think like a gazebo would be considered an accessory structure too, and that would add to the total, so.
Would it really, even like a wide open one? Like, really?
Because it's got walls and a roof.
But it's like the setbacks.
Okay. What about an enclosed swing or a covered swing?
That's not permanent.
No, but neither would a gazebo. I wouldn't
It's
consider
not a
permanent.
building. It's not a building. It's-
Oh, okay.
I think it's good you're going into detail about this, because it is a significant, well, it's an addition to the code. And you ought to feel comfortable with it.
There's a lot of changes.
We want to dive into home occupation. We're at
Or 9 o'clock.
I mean, I was just saying,
It's
we
9
could spend a
o'clock.
lot of time on home
Oh, do we-
occupation. I was
Do we
just
want to
wondering-
call time? Is that what you, people are tired? I
Well,
know.
it's a
It's-
good chance for you to read it and really
Go
understand
through
what
it
it
again
says.
a little bit, but
I mean, if you read just the intent, that's page 15, 12060, home occupations, intent. It talks about, this is all designed to preserve the residential nature and not let businesses overwhelm the residential nature. Whether all the other stipulations to code do that, to Gene's concern, is a decision. But if you read the intent, even Gene should feel good.
No, I like the intent,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm saying you
Yep.
need to delete that other whole section.
Yep.
Under major, it's just like, it doesn't fit with the intent language. of the
Could I
intent.
ask that if we're gonna adjourn on this, could you also look at the rural residential commercial? Because that's a decision to be made along with.
I know.
Home occupations.
Yeah, Frankly, I think what we agreed at the prior meeting of this topic was that we were gonna only do what's in 120, section 120, when it did not include the rural residential. That is a major section. I'm not saying I wouldn't love if you do it, but I don't think that was agreed to be included in this portion in the last meeting. That is a pretty big deal.
How about the short-term rentals? Are you guys comfortable with not having them? Or would you like
I am.
more discussion?
I think with the bread and breakfast or bed and breakfast that we have,
Yes.
I feel comfortable getting rid of the short-term rentals. So,
Just want to make sure.
what do you think, Gene?
Oh. Yeah, no, I was just, are we drawing a line where we're cutting off for the night, or
I did on mine,
where did you do that?
right above home occupation, so
Okay.
just above 120.
120.
Dash 60
Yeah.
is where we pick up.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And we want to pick up discussion on this.
We want to continue at the first Monday of the month, or does that work for, what, Scott? I know in the past, the code committee has taken summers off.
Yeah,
or
we
slowed up some.
We're kind of hoping, but so here's what we were proposing so far, that 2.5 weeks from now on a Thursday morning would be our last meeting of the season. But we'd still contribute individually. Like if you want to get together and have me here, I would be willing to come.
Okay,
I'd be willing to continue to write up changes that you come up with. And, John has shown ability to come to these things as well. So we just wouldn't continue to meet as a group.
Yeah.
I would send summaries to the other members, but we
Okay.
just wouldn't meet and talk.
I didn't
about
know if you had travel plans or anything.
it. No,
coming
I
up.
may from time to time, but nothing large.
So the first Monday we'd be looking at June 2nd.
Right now, it looks okay with me.
7 PM.
Yes. All right, well,
What is it?
June 2nd?
Okay,
I don't know, there's still quite a bit to do. Would you want to start at 6 or 7's better?
For me, later's a little better just for work, but I mean, it could be raining that day and it wouldn't matter, but it
Right,
may also
That's
not
hard,
be. And
yeah.
then
You're unavailable. All right, we'll stay to 7.
I think we got over 50% of,
I think this was a wonderful discussion.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in and chew around and spit it back out.
yeah.
yeah, it's a lot,
It is a lot.
and thanks to the code committee again for,
Yes.
Mhm.
Scott, I know that, I have to say that I know it's a workshop here, but I think what you're doing with the modular and mobile homes, I think that's a good path that you are going down. And I would like to see you continue that, but, I know this is just a workshop as far as we can go with it.
Well, so anything I put out hereafter will include the mobile home stuff that we talked about as a part of it, as a part of this
Yes.
activity.
June second.
When this is all done, Scott, what are you gonna do?
Uh, Well, to be honest, it feels a little bit like, I don't know your political leanings, but Elon Musk and his Doge process, he said, somebody asked him, how do you know where to find waste, fraud and abuse? He said, anywhere you look. And that's, this town code has not been updated for a long, long time, so there's still a long way to go.
Yeah,
I know, once you start going into it, it's like, wait a minute, that makes no sense.
Yeah,
That doesn't
yeah.
connect to anything.
Yeah,
If you look at it, the zoning is obviously the biggest piece of it.
Yeah.
Although solar's gonna be different too.
yeah.
well, you got solar coming along, which is finite, but then we've got.
Is that ready or almost ready? I think Luther said it was almost ready.
Yeah, they're getting there.
All right, we had
Janet's
another
back
member
here.
here.
We sent stuff to Luther a couple of days ago. He's looking at it. See if we copied everything that he wanted.
He probably can't hear you.
I was gonna submit it here. I knew that this residential thing was coming up and I didn't want to overload everybody. I figured, we get through that. I was gonna send it out to Dan to send out to everybody. So you could, start reading it through, and then schedule a workshop, after we get through this residential, upgrade here. And, we'll get the solar law right behind it. But that's where I am with it.
So after that, the code committee still has done a lot of work on subdivision of land. Right, that's chapter 100. Which is a pretty big deal, talked about flag lots and a number of other things, private roads, some other road type issues. That's pretty much ready for you folks to look at. And that was a part of my last presentation. And then after that, we're doing planning board processes, which would be site plans, subdivisions and special permits. And there's a lot of meat there too, that the processes need to be improved. So we're a long way from done. We've made a lot of progress as code committee, but
Yes.
you guys getting through it, in addition to all the other stuff you have to do, it's a long project. So I'm not even worried about what I'll do later.
Gotta get to it first.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
everybody. Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll se-
All in favor?
Bye.
Right,
Good night.
so yeah.
It's still